Alright everyone, now we need to talk about propaganda. The really syrupy fluff pieces, like the fluff piece you got like mid last year about Whitmer and her COVID response, or some of the Cuomo coverage as well. And just generally throughout time, occasionally you'll get a story. A lot of them come from MSNBC or Salon. This one, link in the description, actually, archived of course from CNN, about Biden's G7 summit performance. Now, the reality is it was a disaster. He was basically talked down to by Boris Johnson and initially snubbed as well. He forgot the difference between Libya and Syria. He violated COVID protocol, although all of them were actually doing this, including the Queen of England, which is hilarious, and just kept making mistake after mistake, being fiery with reporters for no reason. Not being asked a hardball, not being cajoled or anything like that, just literally being asked about healing diplomatic relations in the wake of Trump, and his answer is 120 days, come on man, give me some time. Biden did everything he could do wrong. He refused to condemn China, pretty much. They talk about China being a problem, a critical interest of the G7 summit nations. Wow, what a stunning condemnation. Instead of saying, well, China is responsible for a virus leaking from the Wuhan lab and killing several million people. Oh, it's a security concern. We're going to have to look into this and talk about it. See, this is the problem with these globalistic, bureaucratic, craptivist groups, is that they never get anything accomplished. This is why the UN is vestigial. It's pointless at this point. It's basically just a rubber stamp for strongly worded letters. But look at this link in the description. CNN's like, well, in comparison to Trump, he was so friendly. He was joking around and laughing with Boris Johnson, and it was a love fest, and he was being friendly with our allies. And now he's going to go off and clobber Vladimir Putin. Not one mention, by the way, of him rescinding the sanctions that Trump himself put on Russia, pertinent to probably the biggest, most stinging thing he can, which is the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. No mention of that whatsoever. No mention of him constantly making mistakes. No mention of the fact that he got laughed at. Not laughed with, but laughed at for forgetting that Boris Johnson had already announced the South African minister that was there. None of these things are magically mentioned in the article. If you read the article and you didn't actually see snippets of Biden at G7, you'd think he did a great idea. Now, is CNN's average viewer going to assume that Biden didn't do a good job? No. They get Trump derangement syndrome. Less than the MSNBC or Vox or Salon viewers, or maybe a Huffington Post reader, but by and large they have Trump derangement syndrome. But that being said, it's just a complete false reality. Again, time and time again, we have archives and video clips and even full-on testimony and shit that shows a reality. And we have a legacy media that by and large does not report that reality, but spins it out of context either by omitting things that someone they like did wrong, or omitting things that someone they dislike did right, like, with Trump, with the economy, or 1,000 other things, or just completely screws around. Selective editing. We had this with the very fine people quote, of course. We've had this with some of Biden's words. The gaffes that he makes, by and large, aren't reported on. Every time that George, even, and I don't like Bush, I'm not defending him, but every time George W. had a Bushism, it was spoken of. At the very least in the digital context. You may not have seen it on the CNN news ticker, but CNN.com would potentially have it. You don't see that with Joe Biden. They don't do the COVID death total ticker anymore, by the way. As of a few days ago, I wonder why they're doing that. Oh, we're not going to bother tracking the cases anymore, because the right guy's in office, of course. It's bullshit. It's propaganda. Lies by omission, lies by structure, but the syrupiness of the fluff piece is like gushing over Joe Biden. Look, okay, he's out of the sweetheart period. You can stop pretending that he's immortal now. You can stop pretending that he's anything other than a bumbling old coot with Alzheimer's disease that's flushing the nation's economy down the toilet. I love it when they try to relabel the inflation that's going on. Well, it's just transitory. A little inflation's actually good for things. Yeah, it's good for 5% inflation month over month is a good thing. Coming in 100K below expectations in the jobs report, that's a good thing. Now, sometimes having a little bit of unemployment is a good idea, says CNN, I'm sure, in a couple of months. Everything's fine, put on a happy face. Yeah. I mean, it's a literal clown world. It's fucked up beyond belief, and there are people that actually believe it. There are people that believe the Hill's push polls, though. He's at 60% approval. With stagflation and high unemployment. Yeah, but he's doing a good job on COVID. Oh, I love it. when CNN or even some of the Fox anchors try to grill people and say, well, Trump did nothing for months because of COVID. You point out the initial response was literally lambasted by the entire DNC, including Biden calling travel restrictions xenophobic. But somehow people have ignored this fact. There are people out there that believe this false reality. The problem is that propaganda goes more quickly than counter-propaganda. So if the legacy media, which now coordinates with themselves and with big tech and with Fortune 500 companies, it's basically fascism. All the big corporations, by and large, are now working together in one nexus to try to prevent populism from rising up because it has them running scared. They're pooping their pants at the moment like little bitch babies. These people will concoct a story, flash it out across all sectors, and within 10 minutes, basically, half the population is believing a lie. It's very, very difficult in that particular environment to counter-propagandize. It's become more difficult. I mean, a lot of people I don't think ever believe that they would go to such drastic and transparent means to spell out disinfo. Really, the real misinformation is coming from big tech and from the big legacy media firms right now that are openly working together to try to snuff out people like me. They even brag about it. That's the funny part. But yeah, this is a fluff piece. Biden failed at G7. Any reasonable reading of the situation would show it to be an abysmal failure. He's fucking, obviously, with the body language, obviously doesn't even get along with Boris Johnson, gets talked down to by him, is making all sorts of mistakes, is doing crazy shit, forgetting where he is, getting led around by his wife half the time. The dude's out to lunch. And yeah, when, I can't remember the group that was posting this, some inside White House source, take this with a grain of salt because it's an unnamed source. We've learned much about them, saying they expect to be Kamala to be president by 2022. Yeah, I mean, that's believable. He'll be 80 years old or 81 or something. He's got Alzheimer's. It progresses, in some cases, relatively quickly. Especially, apparently there's a correlation between having a higher education, and I think he's got a master's or a PhD, so it's up there, and Alzheimer's progressing more quickly when it actually comes around. I think there's also a correlation between being multilingual, like if you're a polyglot and then Alzheimer's kicks in, it's like really drastic. Whereas if you're like some redneck swilling Budweiser, it might kick in earlier but takes longer to progress or something. Rather strange. That's about all. Peace out.